Apple has a habit of letting other companies do the heavy lifting first. They prefer other companies breaking through the walls first before they even step into a new domain. Remember widgets? Apple wasn't the one to introduce them till 2020, but they were definitely the ones to tweak it in such a way that promises a polished product to the people. Apple has a long history of borrowing, tweaking, and polishing services to fit their devices. And fairly, it worked. It worked till it didn't. And it failed miserably with the introduction of Apple Intelligence. The first impressions of Apple Intelligence were introduced in WWDC 2024. Apple promised a privacy first on device system that would redefine how you interact with your iPhone. That meant a smarter Siri, instant summaries, custom emojis, a ChatGPT level brain, but without the data creep. But what actually was shipped was pretty buggy, delayed, and in some cases flat out wrong. Apple's intelligence was supposed to be Apple's answer to OpenAI and Google. Instead, it's looking like a warning sign that even a $1 trillion company can fumble the future if it bets too big too fast. This is the story of Apple Intelligence, what was promised, what was delivered, and why it didn't live up to the hype. When ChatGPT was introduced, every company quickly hopped on the trend and started shipping their first version of an AI model, hoping to lure customers back. We now have Google's Gemini, Twitter's Grok, Microsoft's Copilot, and of course, Apple's Apple Intelligence. At Apple's WWDC event in June 2024, Apple Intelligence was introduced as a major leap forward for the iPhone, the iPad, and Mac. Apple claimed that it wasn't just jumping into AI to follow the trend. Rather, it was rethinking how AI should actually work. The key idea behind is that AI that's powerful but private, something useful but secure. They also said that it wouldn't track you, it wouldn't sell your data, and wouldn't send anything to the cloud. Instead, most of it would run directly on your device. That particular message was really important, especially at a time when companies like Meta and Google were being criticized for how much user data they were collecting. On top of that, Apple promised a completely rebuilt Siri, one that could understand context from your screen, access your messages, photos, calendars, and even apps, and still keep your personal data locked down. Siri would be able to summarize articles, rewrite your emails, schedule your appointments, and even handle tasks across multiple apps, something which Apple had failed to deliver for years. They also promised tools like Genmoji, which was an AI emoji generator, along with smart writing suggestions, email summaries, notification cleanup, and something called Image Playground, which would generate original images on the fly based on your prompts. And to make the launch feel even bigger, Apple announced a partnership with OpenAI in order to integrate ChatGPT directly into Siri and other Apple apps. They made it clear that ChatGPT would only be used with your permission and that Apple Intelligence would decide when to bring it in. It sounded polished, it obviously sounded controlled and private, and most importantly, it sounded powerful. But what was actually shipped was really underwhelming. The first release only included a limited set of features. Users could try out things like Genmoji, they could use basic writing tools like summarization and rewriting, and obviously Image Playground. These were mostly cosmetic, which were fun to play with, but not life changing. And the features that did launch didn't always work as advertised. Summaries were inconsistent, image generation was slow and clunky, and in many cases, the system didn't just respond at all. The most obvious problem was Siri. The core of the entire pitch, the new Siri, that was supposed to be context aware, helpful, and intelligent, didn't even show up. Apple quietly delayed the full Siri overhaul until at least spring 2026. Internally, some Apple execs said it wasn't simply ready. For a company that prides itself on not shipping until something is polished, delaying their main AI feature by more than a year sent a clear signal. They had overpromised. Even the features that did roll out were buggy. Users reported broken summaries, completely wrong information, and very bizarre suggestions. Some users saw features while others didn't. Some languages were supported, others weren't. Some devices got full tools, while others, even with the same chip, didn't. Apple said that it was doing a phased rollout, but it came off more like they were trying to buy time. What was promised in June as a polished, groundbreaking leap forward felt like a beta, and not a great one. But how could a $3 trillion company make such a mistake? Or perhaps mistakes? Truth is, there wasn't one reason Apple Intelligence failed to deliver. There were several reasons and they stacked on top of each other. Let's start with Siri first. If there was one tool that Apple should have nailed by now, it's Siri. Siri launched back in 2011. At the time, it looked futuristic, an intelligent voice assistant built into your phone, but even in 2025, it's still really frustrating to use. It hasn't evolved, it doesn't hold your conversations, and it doesn't understand what's on your screen. Most importantly, it can't even complete basic multi-step tasks reliably. Ask it something remotely complex and you'll usually get a canned response, a link to a web search, or most times nothing at all. Compare that to Google's Gemini Live, where you can speak naturally, interrupt it mid-sentence, ask follow-ups, and even switch between typing and voice mid-conversation. It can access your screen, open your camera, and analyze your surroundings in real time.
We're supposed to be looking at the
So,
camera.
what do you see here?
It looks like you're in a podcast studio. Are you getting ready to record a new episode?
Yeah, I'm about to record this episode with these two people here. Is there anything you think I should ask them?
Oh, God.
That's awesome. Since you're podcasting with two people, you could explore the dynamic of their relationship. Ask them how they first met, or what it's like working together. It often leads to interesting stories.
I want you to tell me about these headphones he's wearing. What are these?
Those are Audio-Technica ATH-M 50X headphones. They're pretty popular in the audio world.
Samsung's Galaxy AI isn't far behind either. It has live translation and a genuinely useful object eraser. These aren't concepts, they work right now. And for Apple, almost everything is still coming soon. And that is the real difference. When ChatGPT launched in November 2022 and kickstarted the AI race, Apple didn't have a response. According to insiders, Apple Intelligence wasn't even on the roadmap at the time. The company simply wasn't interested in generative AI. Craig Federici, Apple's head of software, didn't believe in massive LLM investments. But it wasn't just one bad call. This was years in the making. Siri was never even Apple's idea. It was a third-party app they bought in 2010 for $200 million. Steve Jobs had big plans for it, but he passed away shortly after launch. Then the handoff went wrong. Siri was assigned to Richard Williamson, who was an executive who reportedly clashed with the team and only approved updates once a year. Apple brought in Bill Stasier from Amazon to fix that, but the team again fractured. Engineers disagreed on strategy, some quit, and by the time Apple launched SiriKit in 2016, Amazon's Alexa and Google Assistant had already taken over the market. Then in 2018, Apple poached Google's head of AI. Internally, he was called JG, and he was given full control of Apple's machine learning and Siri strategy. But under JG and his deputy, Robbie Walker, things moved painfully slow. Instead of improving answers or conversation quality, Walker reportedly focused on trimming milliseconds from response times. Efforts to add emotional nuance or empathy were dismissed or ignored. Engineers even started secretly working with another team to push AI improvements behind his back. At the same time, Craig Federici, who didn't trust JG's approach, quietly built a rival AI division under his own team. He called it Intelligent Systems and hired hundreds of engineers. Apple at this point had two separate AI teams working on competing visions. There was a lot of internal politics, a lot of turf wars, and resource fights, which slowed down everything. Meanwhile, OpenAI released ChatGPT. It was fast, flexible, and useful. Apple downplayed it at the beginning. Gigi believed the models were overhyped. He stuck to building Siri with Apple's in-house tools, and they couldn't keep up. Apple eventually trained two LLMs, but neither matched ChatGPT's performance or reliability. Delays piled up, features were promised and then postponed. Engineers were kept in the dark, told to keep building, but weren't sure what they would even ship. The vision broke down, and Apple had to launch something, for the shareholders at least. So they rushed it. The WWDC 2024 pulled the curtain back on Apple Intelligence. But the response was pretty mild. Over the next few months, people started to notice that Apple's intelligent feature wasn't really materializing. In March 2025, Bloomberg reported that Tim Cook had lost confidence in JG. Control of Siri and Apple Intelligence were taken away from JG and Robbie Walker. They were replaced by Mike Rockwell, who was the same engineer behind Vision Pro, somebody known for delivering complex and polished products. By WWDC 2025, Apple Intelligence was once again the headline feature. But this time, the crowd was very skeptical, and rightfully so. Features were still coming soon, and people had started to notice. Apple, the company known for its secrecy and control, simply wasn't built for AI. This kind of tech demands openness, experimentation, and fast iteration. Apple was trying to build AI like it built iPhones, slow, polished, and behind closed doors, and this time it didn't work. The result of this was lost trust, missed opportunity, and plenty of lawsuits. Multiple class action lawsuits were filed accusing Apple of falsely advertising features that didn't exist at launch. When Apple Intelligence launched, the initial criticism was mostly technical. Features didn't work as promised, Siri wasn't updated, summaries were broken. But over time, it became something much bigger. People started asking if Apple had misled them altogether. In early 2025, Apple was hit with a class action lawsuit alleging false advertising and deceptive marketing. The claim was that Apple sold devices like the iPhone 15 Pro and the iPad Pro with promises of breakthrough AI capabilities, only to deliver software that either didn't exist, didn't function properly, or was delayed indefinitely. The case argued that Apple pushed users to upgrade with full knowledge that key features like the new Siri weren't ready. That lawsuit opened the floodgates. Two more class action lawsuits followed in April. At the same time, Apple's brand started to take a hit in the press. The Verge, Bloomberg, and the New York Times all published stories quoting insiders at Apple who described the launch as rushed, disorganized, and deeply disappointing. For a company that's built on trust, this kind of a situation is really dangerous. Now, of course, in a long course of mostly positive events, Apple was given a pass by most consumers. Yet the expectations from WWDC of June 2025 were equally high. By the time WWDC 2025 rolled around, expectations were sky high, mostly because Apple had left so many questions unanswered since the previous launch. People weren't just hoping for progress, they were demanding clarity. The company had spent the last year rolling out Apple Intelligence in bits and pieces, dodging criticism and delaying major features like the new Siri. So naturally, everyone assumed that this was the moment Apple would show up and finally deliver. What were people expecting? For starters, a fully rebuilt Siri. Not just faster, but smarter, which is able to follow conversations, remember the context, and respond naturally, and take real action across your apps. Apple had promised that in 2024. People expected it in 2025, and with ChatGPT's voice assistant being so smart, it was an obvious expectation. People wanted something closer to what Google and Samsung have already shipped. AI tools that felt real, helpful, and present on your device. Gemini was doing great. Galaxy AI was doing it. So the question heading into WWDC was, could Apple finally catch up? Well, what they got was more of the same thing. Apple introduced Apple Intelligence again, almost like it was launching it for the first time. The features that were demoed weren't new at all. The writing tools had already been out in limited form. Genmoji was still mostly a gimmick. And Siri, once again, was the no-show. Yes, Apple promised it would finally arrive in fall 2025. Yes, they said that it will come with personal context, screen awareness, and app integration. But there was still no live demo. There was still no proof. There was still no beta, just a promise. And that's where things started to break for the audience. It wasn't just about the features anymore, it was about credibility. Because when a company like Apple tells you they have got something coming this fall and they have already missed that promise once, people don't get too excited. They get cautious, or worse, they stop caring. That was the mood after this year's WWDC event. A slow public realization that Apple wasn't leading in AI right now. It was trying to catch up. And the more it tried to present itself as ahead of the curve, the more obvious the gap became. The entire major highlight of this year's event was the transparent icons demo. Apple showed semi-clear see-through app icons that were floating over a blurred home screen. They said that it symbolized how Apple Intelligence would live underneath everything you do. Integrated but not intrusive. It looked slick visually, but it wasn't functional. It was pretty much a placeholder, and icons didn't respond or demonstrate actual AI behaviors. And even though it's in beta still, people already dislike it. Essentially, it seemed like an eye candy with no operational substance. Especially after Windows has already done and forgotten something like this. So the main question is, what is next for Apple? Apple has already made its move and it didn't land. Now they're in a rare position where they're behind and not ahead. So what now? What does Apple actually need to do if it wants to stay in the AI conversation? And more importantly, regain people's trust. First of all, they need to ship. There's no need for any more vague timelines and no more coming this fall. If the rebuild Siri is going to exist, it needs to work. Second thing, there's a need for honesty. Apple's brand has always relied on secrecy and control, but AI is not hardware. It's iterative, it improves with feedback, and Apple has to accept that it cannot just drop the finished AI product out of the sky. The third thing that they need to do is to rebuild Siri's credibility. It's not enough to add a few features and call it new. Siri needs to be reintroduced from scratch. It has to be useful, it has to be accurate, and it has to feel like it belongs in 2025 and not in 15. Finally, they also need to stop marketing features before they are real. That's what has led to the lawsuits, and that's what cost them the trust. They don't need to win the headlines, they need to win users, and that starts with doing the work before telling the story. Apple obviously isn't out of the game, not by a long shot. But with a company as big as theirs, small mistakes quickly become the highlight. They still have the hardware, they still have the ecosystem, they still have the privacy angle that other companies cannot match, but they don't have that forever. If fall 2025 doesn't deliver something genuinely useful, something that actually changes how people use their iPhones, this won't just be a failed launch. It will be a missed decade, especially with Google's AI getting so smart.